Facebook is now the Metaverse, which is horrible. One of the biggest problems with all things social is the ability to hide behind a fake persona. Now, Facebook is taking that to the extreme with Metaverse. Now you're not a person, you're an avatar. You can be anything you want, bully everyone and anyone behind whatever facade you wish. This is nothing but a diversion of an already broken system. Steve didn't post lies on the web, my avatar did. Steve didn't bully, my avatar did. Steve didn't buy garbage marketed as the latest, greatest product on Facebook, my avatar did. Steve is clean, but Steve's avatar is vile. None of this is anything other than don't look behind the curtain, there's nothing to see here, so Facebook can keep on doing what it always has been doing, pimping itself to anyone and everyone who will pay the tax. In other news, Google has joined Apple and Microsoft in the $2 trillion market cap club. At what point do these guys start forming their own armies and declaring themselves sovereign nations? Taxes? Screw taxes. I'll just make my own infrastructure and only invite my friends to use it. It sounds crazy, but at these valuations, these companies are more powerful than most nation states. And as such, they have the ability to do really crazy things. Being a free market believer, I hate the idea of people who are out of touch with the new realities, namely old white guys in the US government, deciding how to rein in free market economies. But at the same time, we do need to protect society from the potential of the Borg. It's a conundrum, but I still lean on free markets far more than I'm going to lean on legislation. Computer Weekly recently wrote a story about workers in the gig economy. They reported that just under 25% of workers in England and Wales work on a gig economy platform at least once a week. That's up significantly year over year. Platform examples include Uber or DoorDash or Deliveroo, for example. A platform is something that connects buyers and service providers. The point of the story is that platform providers have essentially been bad boys in not providing adequate services or benefits to their service providers by treating them as users instead of employees. The theory is that this is old-fashioned worker exploitation in the modern era, and I can see how that can be true. I'm not advocating abuse of power in any way. However, I also see the eventual benefit of what these platforms enable, and that's entrepreneurialism. Big companies with tens of thousands of employees are wonderful, but they don't make the economic world go around. Entrepreneurs starting businesses do. Sole proprietorships or small businesses are what makes the world economies thrive. That and government-controlled economies that portray themselves as free market economies like Russia and China. Innovation for good almost always comes out of an entrepreneurial endeavor. Its first goal is not to get crushed by the establishment it lives in. And if it can do so, it can literally change the world and the world's economics. Steve Jobs and Apple are just one example of many. Try to remember way back when that the iPhone was invented halfway through 2007, which wasn't even 15 years ago. But look at how the entire world has changed within that time frame. Anyway, these platforms, presuming they aren't used to create slave labor, enable those who never would have considered taking the leap into self-employment to take the plunge, which very often is all that is needed to turn a lifelong employee into a new venture entrepreneur. Having said that, I'm also all for the companies who develop these platforms to get paid for them. They are entitled to their riches, just not at the abusive expense of their service providers. As an entrepreneur myself, I know there are costs to doing business. I pay rent, salaries, benefits, etc., like everybody else, and these platforms are just modern era utilities. I could theoretically have built and started my own electric company, but that would be asinine and impossible. As long as you understand the costs and you can deal with it, the choice is yours. Don't punish the platform provider for providing you a platform. And speaking of entrepreneurs gone wild, Theranos have raised over $945 million with seemingly zero due diligence by anyone. No one. Granted, the company lied. They made up validation reports with company logos saying that the Theranos super cold fusion water into wine time machine not only worked, but it worked great. Clearly fraud. But no one checked. No one actually followed up with any of those supposed companies and institutions that claim to have proven the technology. Not one investor tested the device. Everyone believed the fake reports. Whew. So while I can almost understand the second investor being duped by Elizabeth Holmes, I cannot for the life of me understand how the next 28 investors came on board with nothing but false data and a nice smile to collateralize. There has been a lemming mentality in Silicon Valley investment communities for a long, long time now, but this is beyond ridiculous. She got people to invest by being shrewd and powerful and a great liar. But interestingly, her defense seems to be that she was naive and taken advantage of by her partner and really didn't know that she was full of crap. She is. She was. But who's worse? The liar or the establishment of lemmings who jumped all over each other to throw money at her? Senior analyst Paul Neshadaway from ESG just released some excellent research on the hyperconverged infrastructure market. If you thought this market has been played out, think again. 68% of organizations have plans to deploy a new HCI cluster in the next 12 to 18 months, and these are big clusters normally. Growth in HCI is no surprise. As organizations are expanding from the core to the edge to the cloud, companies are considering HCI as the preferred platform for rapid time to value, as well as integration into their existing ecosystem. 82% of organizations currently using HCI expect to increase their spend on these platforms over the next 12 months. Why does this market continue to be so hot? Several reasons. First, IT is complicated, still ridiculously complicated, insanely complicated. HCI, if nothing else, tames the savage IT beast and simplifies a big hunk of the stack. Second, HCI integrated into automation platforms helps close the IT skills gap that is plaguing our industry. 58% of IT pros indicate that improving IT automation integration is the biggest driver behind their organization's decision to deploy hyperconverged infrastructure technology. Which means to me that 42% think that keeping things ridiculously complex is job security. It isn't. The machine is smarter than the human. So if you actually believe that your knob-turning specialization is good for your company or yourself, you're delusional. History is littered with the career carnage of people thinking they were invaluable because they were the only ones who could perform a certain task, tweak a certain knob, only to find out that that task was ultimately destined to become automated. So either jump on the bandwagon or get run over by it, my friends. That's all for this week. Thanks very much for watching, and tune in again next week.